as you know, we have a selection of experimental films that we're going to be viewing today. And I'd like to introduce you to the curator of these films. This woman is an her work has been exhibited internationally. She's an experimental painter and filmmaker. According to On the Verge magazine, her work has been considered a magical act. Let me tell you a bit more about her. Since graduating from the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, the oldest art school in the United States, she has become a fixture in the history of avant-garde filmmaking. Throughout her career, she's been dedicated to the work of women artists. She founded Another Experiment by Women Film Festival in 2010. She believes that when women artists learn to work as a team, teamwork makes the dream work, our unique creative visions will be realized. I am happy to introduce you to the founder and curator of Another Experiment by Women Film Festival, Lili White. How many people out here have never experienced experimental film in their life? Okay, so this was an eye-opener. So, let's start out with my first question. Tell us about the two people who most influenced your journey from being an experimental painter to being an experimental filmmaker, and how does their influence resonate in your work today?
Well, I would say that I was always very interested in film along with painting. And the two people I would say are Maya Deren, who is a pillar of experimental filmmaking in America. And she made an incredible film. I know you can see it on YouTube, called Meshes of the Afternoon. And it's really about her anxiety about becoming married and about life in general, I suppose. So I strongly recommend that you check that out. She was very interested in dance, and it's all movement-based, and it's visually very beautiful. The second person I would say is Luis Buñuel, who was a surrealist in Spain. He escaped there during the regime of Franco and went on to make many, many feature-length films that you can rent that all have a kind of somewhat surreal overtone. Both of these people were very interested in dreams, and that's what I'm interested in, and you can see maybe a little bit from the presentation we did today that plays a big part in these films. There's other experimental films that are not like this, that are also called experimental cinema.
Excellent. So, what inspired you to found Another Experiment by Women Film Festival? I'm very curious.
I was, when I was a kid, I knew I was an artist, and I would draw and paint, but I would also watch the 4 p.m. movie matinee from the time I was a little child. So I saw a lot of different kinds of films that were mostly Hollywood-based. And when I was in high school, let's say, America discovered European cinema or Japanese cinema. People like Kurosawa were shown in the major cities. And I wanted to see something like that. Sometimes they would show it very late at night on television, and I would watch that, and I discovered in my neighborhood drugstore that had a magazine rack something called Millennium Film Journal. And Millennium Film Workshop was a place in New York City that started in the late 60s, early 70s, and people there were making experimental cinema and showing it and talking with each other about it. And this journal had different articles about the different movies. So every time I was living in Philadelphia, and every time I got the chance to go to New York, I would go to Millennium and see what they were screening that week. And I started making my own experimental films at the same time I was studying painting using Super 8. I wanted to, after I made a few films, I knew that I wanted to make a layered image, and to do that with film, you needed something called the optical printer. And right now, Millennium Film Workshop is one of the only places in the New York City area that has that. But I could not get up here to do that, so I kind of put it off for a while. But then when the computer came out with the editing programs for video, I thought, this is fantastic, because I can make 1 million films and it's going to cost me next to nothing as opposed to the cost of having a film bill. So then I would go see experimental films, and I realized that in a lot of the experimental film festivals, they ended up showing the same 12 people over and over again. And they were excellent filmmakers. But I thought, well, gee, is this it? 12 people? So a woman who was in college had a Manhattan Neighborhood Network cable TV show. And she was curating just women's work. And I started watching the show, and I realized how much, if the show was only cinema by women, you came away with a somewhat different flavor in your head than if it was a mixed bag or if it was mostly all men. So I decided that we needed to see more of that, and that's why I started the film festival. And if you go to our website, Another Experiment by Women Film Festival, or axwff.com, and sign on to our mailing list, we do at least 4 or more screenings a year at Anthology Film Works, which is at 2nd Street and 2nd Avenue. But you have to sign on to our mailing list because that's the only way I can send you an announcement. I don't have a yearly calendar in place. Every 3 months we get a date to screen.
So I have one more question. How do you differentiate experimental film from narrative film? What are the definitions of both? And also, what is that one element that makes the women's viewpoint different from the men's viewpoint?
Well, in general, I would say that the world has been run by men for quite some time now. And what has happened, in my opinion, is that people make film, and it's a media that people want to sit down and watch, usually as a group. And because men were in charge for so long, they narrowed down certain formulas so that things are presented in a certain way. And if you differentiate or stray off the path of that, there seems to be some kind of prejudice involved, like, well, you can't do that, or, that's how I see it, at any rate. And I would say that we are used to Hollywood narrative cinema, and that is made by a big studio, and they are looking to make a product that appeals to a mass market. And that's fine, but there are other people that can use this medium now, especially since most of us have a computer and can get an editing program and create our own stuff. And if we put some effort and work into it, maybe we can come up with some new works that are not made for the mass market, that say something about our own mind and what we desire and want to create or want the world to be like. And that's what basically I'm trying to promote. And it's movies that are not YouTube fodder either. They're made with a purpose and a direction, and these people are quite serious about what they do. And if you do like seeing what you saw, we have an online presence for you to view some more experimental fare in your own homes, on your computer, or your Apple TV if you connect it up. And it's called axwonline.com. So you can go there and view our choices. And with all of these films are on there, there's also some questions and answers with the filmmakers on there, and they tell you what their intentions were in making this kind of work.
Lastly, what advice would you give to young female filmmakers about taking risks and putting their unique voice in the eyes of the audience, before the audience?
I would say just go for it. Especially like in experimental cinema, there may not be a storyboard or a narrative in the sense of a strict script. So if you have the desire to make something, just follow that desire. If you want to pick up the camera and film that piece of dust on the rug, just do it. And even if you don't know what you're going to do with that, as time goes on, I bet you will know. You'll amass other things, and then something will click. My job is acting as a curator, and it's very important to me to place one thing before the other or after another one. That joins them together in a kind of very special way. So each show has its own flavor and can make your head go off in a different direction depending on how these are stacked against each other.
And this particular show, what was the...
I chose these pieces because I didn't know if any of you were familiar with experimental film, and I thought all of these pieces really have a strong voice of a woman wanting to say something. And they also have some social issues involved, like the first one, Toxic Park, especially. And so I thought that there would be something here for everyone, no matter what your experience was.
Was that your experience as an audience, that there was something that you identified with? Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.